Now, I need to organize here. Hold on for me just 1 second while I back out of this. Hey, what's happening here? Uh-oh. Oh, looks like a crash on that one. No, let's try it again. Here we go. Oh, there we go. That's better. And that's even better. Okay. All right, that puts us on the website. Let's get this one up. And we also need one more thing here, which is our assignment. Project resources. That's all we need. Okay, perfect. We're ready to roll here. Just roll that up. Speaking of roll, now, why can't I? Stop doing that. Why can't I move this across? There it is. There we go. All right. Let's look down here for a minute. Okay. Just move things around here and get settled in. Ah, here we go. All right. Good afternoon. Yeah, we're up to halfway now. What we want to do this afternoon is just look at where some of the techniques that we talked about earlier today are applied in our enhancements. All right. There are a few places where these come in really, really handy, right? Because they save us a lot of typing and they give us a little bit of an edge when it comes to being faster, more efficient, and getting more value from the time that we spend configuring and debugging. All right. So let me just want to check here. Okay, I know what we're doing. All right, so we want to take a look at a couple of these enhancements today, and we'll continue next week, all right? Because there are a few, and we want to do them one by one, but we need to, again, get the right background in order to know exactly what we're doing. But the one trick that uses a lot of these features that we talked about today is the pseudo enhancement. All right. Actually, just to say, right, for extended LDAP, if we look at the instructions on the website, I'm going to do that this way. On my TinyNet, come to adding a DIT. First, we need to edit the file a little bit, all right? But the second thing we need to do is add a whole bunch of new directives to our slapme.conf. And we do that with techniques that we saw this morning, right? Change directory command, and then use the cat command to read a file, send it to standard out, but instead of seeing it on the screen like we would normally see, we redirect that, and double pointing means add it at the end of the file to our slappy.conf. And that is so much easier than trying to type it in. It's even easier than copy and paste. All right? So that's the first place we see this showing up. The second place here is in host management with prompt color. All right? With the prompt color, the idea is that we need to put the color code into the command, all right, that sets up the user prompt. All right. Now, this is really easy on our TinyNet system, but if you try and do this on Ubuntu, you'll find that you need to change it in 2 or 3 different places because somehow people at Canonical have a really bad attitude about color prompts. I think it comes from their bad attitude about the root shell, all right? But this, again, actually is not too difficult, all right? Just to point out here, you know, we talked today about the idea of operating system shells, right? The operating system shell gives us the command line interface, right? And we said there's 2 in Windows, one called command, one called PowerShell, all right? And there's a whole bunch in Unix, all right? SH was the original one, all right? So there's ASH and BASH and DASH and KSH and ZSH and CSH. So never mind, all right? Never mind. All we need to do is find the right place in the configuration file and voila, add in these crazy color code thingamajiggies, all right? Again, the syntax is really horrible, but just go slowly, do it a little bit carefully, all right? And follow the convention. Comment out the original one so you know what was there before, right? And all you're actually doing is adding in the color code. 32 for non-root user, that means it's green. 31 for root user, that has to be red. And if you forget what they are supposed to be, or if you want to get a little creative, just go to the quick reference for the escape codes and pick a color that you like, all right? But generally, right, use Arch Linux, for example. They have this set up already, right, with red for root and green for a normal user. Where else do we use these? Those are 2 particular places. Let's just take a quick look here, all right? Have different color prompts for normal users and root. Ooh, change the startup display to show a random fortune in color each time a user logs in. right? When we do this, right, actually all we need to do is change one of the user configuration files. That should be in, I think that one is here in Standard IO ASCII art. Let's come back to our ASCII art page here. See if we can find that one in the documentation. There's Fortune, there's Figlet and boxes, Fortune boxes and word wrap. Ah, here it is, all together at login time. All right. So we need to look at etc profile.d. There's a few, Windows keeps all of this in the registry, and we can find the startup files, and when we look deeper into Windows, right, we look down here in C users, right, we can see that this is all the profile in Windows, all right? And there's a few of these dot ones here, okay, that are configuration files for the profile. Linux is different than Windows, of course, all right? But the principle is the same. They're doing the same thing, all right? They're just doing it a slightly different way. So in a user home directory, all right, we'll find a .bash profile, all right, or exactly which one depends on our system, okay? And there's a little bit of variation there, but etc profile is the one to use on our system. And since it just calls all the scripts in profile.d, we find this one and fix the name that's there. Somebody spelled it wrong. It's called Fortunes in that file, and it needs to be called Fortune, right? And give it a nice color. 33M is just an example here. All right, and again, actually it says here Fortune boxes. You can use the word wrap as well, like we did before, or extend it out a little bit, right? Save the Fortune to a variable, and then use the Caesar 13, right? Caesar is the Caesar cipher. It's just a simple letter substitution encryption, right? So if we save this to a variable, right, we can echo the value, whatever is saved in that variable, through the encryption program, right, print it out inside of one of those boxes with just stars, one of the plainest ones, right? Then turn the color off. Read command, we didn't get there this morning, right? But you go back and look, you can see the example there, but read -p puts up a prompt, all right, that says, press any key to decrypt with a new line on the end, right? And when you press any key, it will turn it around and show the plain text in color 32 rather than color 31, all right? Which I don't remember what the numbers are, all right? But the quick reference is always there to get that for us, 31, 32, 33, all right? Quick reference is there to sort us out on exactly what those colors are. Just check in over here. All right. Edit etc issue.mytivm to stop advertising the root password. All right. That amounts to finding that file and deleting the proper line that says to get started, log in as root with this password. You can edit it out to whatever you like, or you can just delete it. All right. So, and that one also, you'll see those color codes inside that file. I don't have a virtual machine running right now. I suppose I could start one, but I don't think it's important. I think you can find that one. All right. These two are the two that actually the setup to normal users part here. Right? You've got a little video on that one, but it's really dead simple. Okay. Setting up users, we've got a script. It asks a lot of questions, but none of them are important except the username and the password, right? So here in user accounts, all right, we just use the add user command with the username, all right? Asks a lot of questions about UID, initial group, home directory, shell, expiry date, all of that. And you can just enter until, except for the login name. You should use add user and login name, otherwise it will prompt you. Guess what? It's just a shell script that uses the read command and a prompt. On that same page, it explains sudo. All right. Now, in Windows, back here for a minute. Let me find a exe file here. No, there we go. Firefox installer. Actually, you did this already with VirtualBox. You right-click it and run as administrator. All right? That gives you elevated privileges for the purpose of that one command. And the way to get that done in Windows is to make yourself a member of the administrator group. And guess what? It's exactly the same in Linux, except it's called sudo, all right? And when you look at instructions for Ubuntu, oops, where did it go? When you look at instructions for Ubuntu, all right, everything is always sudo this, sudo that, sudo whatever, all right? And so, right, there it is right there. You see so many helpful commands predicated by sudo because the people of that distribution have a very bad attitude about logging in on the root account. All right. We advertise the root password, and we always kind of work as root because that's the most efficient way for us when we're getting things set up. But more properly, sudo is the proper, generally accepted best practice, let's say it that way. Just like it is in Windows to be part of the administrators group. But yeah, I don't know. There's an argument on both sides of the issue here, all right? And again, we'll consider that in a little bit more formal. We'll consider it in a little more formal manner later on. But it's simple enough to see why, right? Anybody that's in the administrators group, in effect, has an administrator password, where we have one administrator password, which is TOOR. Right? So, at any rate, leaving that aside, right, the point of this exercise is to create the same setup as Ubuntu, all right? Which means that you need to add people into the wheel group. It's called the wheel group here, all right? And, ouch, man, you want the full story? There are a couple of places where you want to know your history and amaze your friends with more by knowing some trivia. There's a couple of links to set you on that track, all right? And again, you just need to take a look at the configuration file and uncomment the one you want, depending on if you want the user to enter their password again or not. All right? Now, again, another purpose of this is that once you know how to do this on the TinyNet, if you're going on to use Kali Linux or some other flavor of Linux that is constantly asking you to sudo, constantly asking you for your password, you can, it's the same sudo here that it is there, right? And so if you get a little bit familiar with this sudo configuration file, you're going to have a very easy time customizing your elevated privilege experience, right, in every other Linux distro, right? But this is one of the things that makes that color prompt so nice, all right, is that if you say sudo bash so that you have a root shell, you're always going to have a prompt in one color, and whenever you're out of it, you have a prompt in a different color. It can keep you from making some very costly mistakes, right? Some very costly mistakes. It also, the assignment, I believe here, let me just allow no root login, all right, which means that you need to disable the root password. Be careful about this because once you disable the root password, it is disabled, okay? So the suggestion here is to use Alt F2 or Alt F3, anything up to Alt F6, all right, to get a second login, right, and get a root shell with sudo bash All right. And then just enter the password minus L. That's not a 1. It's a little L for lock and root. All right. And that way you can, all right, you can unlock it, but don't just have one login and enter password minus L root and then discover that since the root password is disabled, you can never get a root shell. All right. You want to be a little bit careful with this, okay? But should work without any problem. Rest of this page have no practical application in our TinyNet. All right, so it's a little bit outside what we need to know when we're considering the assignment. Now, let me just look down here a little bit more. Oh. Here's an interesting point. All right. 3.1, you might want to put this into your mix when you're thinking about individual and group enhancements. All right. 3.1, step A is clone of new VM for the user server and set up 2 normal users. All right. So if you're going to work on both of these, right, you might want to take that into account. All right. This one is about setting up websites, individualized websites for users. I'm not going to stop here right now, right? But we'll come back to it if we have a couple of minutes. Let me just roll down here a little bit more. Just to, that's not one of the ones. Ooh, protocol analysis. I'm going to highly disrecommend this one, right, for reasons we can talk about a little bit later. This one, IP tables. Save the rules to a shell script. This one we will definitely look at next week, all right, because this one follows very closely along with what we were doing today. Actually, maybe we should do that one today. Syslog server. Oh, I want a special mention on this one. All right. Syslog server. Be sure to run the fixconfig script on the patch ISO before you try this enhancement. Okay? Because otherwise, in the log files, it says last message repeated n times. All right? And you could go in and fix the syslog configuration yourself, but it's easier to fix it along with installing the other few scripts and updates that are on the patch ISO. All right? And again, the patch ISO is here in the, hey, wait a minute. Oh, this one, assignment details tab. There we go. And the assignment folder, right, can just download the patch ISO. And while you're here, get an updated copy of the project resources document as well. Right. Just take 2 more minutes here. All right. We'll come back to that one. S-Tunnel we talked about. OpenVPN we talked about. Oh, hey. Compile and install. All right. This one, again, is one that you need to make a new VM, right? Because this one has the C compiler and the build system that takes up more space than a standard TinyNet machine. You can't just use a 2 clone for this one, all right? In the ASCII art page, let's go down a little bit. All together at login time, that's for sudo. Uh-oh. Hey, where did it go? Uh-oh. Oh, sorry. That's the page I was looking for. GCC and make. All right. Now, the reason for this one is to let you learn how to use the Linux C compiler. Right? And again, once you get familiar with it on the TinyNet, it's the same for every other distribution because we're all using the same set of GNU utilities. All right. I'm not going to spend any time on this today, all right? But the whole idea of this is to get familiar with it, and the way you get familiar with it is building a couple of ASCII art applications just because they're fun, right? This one is called the Linux Steam Locomotive, and all you do is compile the binary SL, and when you type SL, it runs this steam locomotive across the screen. This guy had way too much free time on his hands at some point, all right, because he went to all the effort of making this animated steam locomotive, all right? So this shows you how to manage the build files, all right? libcaca and toilet is another application, all right? But just Google that one up because, again, a lot of people are adding this to their distribution. There's GitHub. There we go. All right. This is the kind of output it creates for us. All right. It writes it in big letters like Figlet does, but it has different fonts like reversed, all right? Different colors, different styles. It's really kind of fun. And it's a good project because you have to compile the library for it first, right? And then you can compile the application. And then you can start generating your ASCII art, all right? However you want it to turn out. Right? So there's a lot of it. There's a lot of ones here, a lot of examples, and yeah, that's what it's for. Right? Learn how to use the compiler and have a little fun creating ASCII art banners. All right. Now, let's come back to Moodle just for a moment. No, only GCC is too big. All others. Just clone, the to clone, and use the conf.iso, ISO. All right. So that means 3.1, 3.1, right? Let's come back up here for a second. 4, yeah. 3.1, and hang on a second. 3.1 and 11. Okay. No, you need to. The config ISO. Okay. This Thursday, everybody's in security. We're going to talk about 11 in a week or two. All right. It's only the GCC one that you have to start over from 0. All right. Because you need to use the check the README here. All right. Create a new VM with the base ISO, except it needs more RAM and it needs a much bigger hard disk. All right. Otherwise, sorry, it just needs more RAM and a bigger hard disk. Otherwise, everything is exactly the same. All right. The install GCC will install the compiler and all of the build system for you. Okay. It's just that you have to go through the whole CF disk routine to make a bigger hard disk so that everything is going to fit. For the other ones, you either can use your existing base system virtual machines, okay, or except for 3.1 and 11, right, where you need to clone your virtual machine, all right, and use the conf ISO to configure them, all right. This one for now R is 11, and for 3, not stated explicitly there. We'll fix that, all right, but here, all right, choose TinyNet, no role from the set role.sh menu, just clone it off, start set role, pick it off the menu, and make the little configuration changes. And everything is in order. Right. 1811. Okay. While we're on the topic here, let's go back to Moodle for a minute. And we're in the assignment details and submission links to get to the assignment folder and the patch ISO. Let's back up here for a moment. There we go. And down here in the TinyNet enhancement videos, okay. IP tables, all right? We're going to look at this one next week, but I think it's clear enough, all right, when we want to just talk a bit about the theory behind this before we try it out, all right? But if you follow the videos, you're going to see that the process here is exactly the process we talked about this morning, all right, where you type in your command, you test it, and once you're happy with it, you get it back up with your up arrow key and put an echo and a single quote at the beginning, and go all the way down to the end, put another single quote and double pointy, and redirect it into a file that you created and set the permissions to, you set the executable bits on this file, all right, so that you have a shell script that you can use to set up your firewall rules in the future. All right? Very straightforward. We'll look at this one next week. The virtual site, these are the ones that correspond to 3.1. All right, this is a video that just shows the process we were referring to and discussing in the chat there about clone your to clone and use the config ISO to set up a user server that is called no role on the menu. All right, basically what that does is it sets the startup files to connect to the TinyNet DNS by default on NetB, but the instructions are there to change that to wherever you want it to be. This one walks you through the process of creating an account with add user. All right, it's just as applicable to enhancement number 2 as it is to number 3. All right, the rest of these are particular to 3.1 and 3.2. All right. So these are here because these are the ones that maybe are a little bit harder to get your mind around, especially the cron and configure monkey and the virtual service. And again, we'll get to these in due time, but the explanations are there, and just take a look at it, see if you can figure it out for yourself. Can't, just hold on for a week or two, and we'll get around to looking at this in a little bit more detail. Now, the last one here is TCP flow. All right, that's the one on the assignment here. Oops, got more. Virtual service with NFS. That's the one of the videos we just looked at. This one, protocol analysis. All right. Now, I think a lot of people get excited about the idea of packet sniffers. All right. And there is a fairly complete reference here. All right. But, it's easy enough to get it started. This is the important part. All right. And I just want to highlight this right now. All right. You might find this enhancement harder than it looks because of the way, oops, what am I doing here? Because of the way browsers work. All right. When we access the default Monkey web page, all right, we make requests for some images and some HTML text. When we access a mailbox in Squirrel Mail, all right, we've got requests going out to the IMAP server to load up the account data for the inbox. And when we, if we use it for checking the LDAP address book, we get even more of these requests. And let me just pick one of these here. All right, let me just roll this along a little bit. Now, we end up right here, we end up with all of these files, all right, that need to be matched up by source address, destination address, and port number. Now, there's all of these here, right? If we were using a very cheap and low rent browser, these would all be in one file, all right? Because these all concern loading one page. It's making 4 requests here from the browser to the web server, all right, for HTML and for various images, all right? And you can see that there's a whole bunch of requests here on all of these high-numbered ports, all right? And that's because our applications are opening multiple connections, all right, to try to work faster. They're making parallel queries, all right? Now, that's all good, but what it comes down to is a kind of conflict of interest between our user communities, right? These multiple parallel processes, all right, are a very good thing from the perspective of the user, right? Because our application works faster. But from the perspective of us, all right, looking at these flows with a packet sniffer, it becomes a bit confusing and a bit tedious. And so it becomes a kind of a project to sort these out, right? Get them matched up, and then investigate what's inside each one of these to find what we want. Right? If you're using a really cheap browser, old-fashioned thing, then there would just be one file from the client to the server and one file from the server to the client. But instead, we end up with all of these multiple files. So I can't change the assignment. It was already there. It's an option, all right? But be prepared, because it can take a bit more time than you expect to get this one done. All right? Just forewarned, all right? Now you know, and you can make up your mind about it. But the videos here walk you through the whole process, all right? And perhaps even better, all right? There we go. The ones that are not part of the enhancement, just interesting, all right, is the repeating this exercise. This one was done with S-tunnel off, all right? This one was done with S-tunnel on. Just open that up in the new tab. Let me just show you what happens when we put S-tunnel on. All right. Can't see it here, but there are two sets of files now, all right? Both of them equally long, but some of these are 127 files, and some are for the normal plain text port, all right, with a 192, all right? And so it comes down to a little bit extra sorting here, all right? All of these 127 ones are the plain text files, right? All of the 192s are the encrypted ones. So we catch both sides of the conversation. We catch all of the whole conversation, both the unencrypted part and the encrypted part. The unencrypted part where it gets passed from S-tunnel across the network. I'm sorry, S-tunnel up to the server, and the server passes down to S-tunnel, and we capture the encrypted part that goes out and comes back. All right? But again, as you can see here, it's kind of a job to get these all sorted out, okay? This one cuts down, shortens the process. It doesn't show the complete process, right? But then you can go inside here and look inside these files and see what the content is. But take that one on if you want to, all right? But I kind of disrecommend it, all right? Because I don't know, I think it's a little bit boring to just be sorting files.